They say the person who screams the loudest in an argument is usually the one losing control, but the person who leaves without saying a single word, they have already won the war. You see, silence isn't empty. It's full of answers. When Clara disappeared from her husband's life, she didn't leave a note. She didn't slam the door. She didn't take the car. She simply vanished. Her husband thought he had won. He thought she left with nothing. He was wrong. She didn't just walk away. She flew. And the plane she took? It revealed a secret so expensive it would bankrupt him just to hear it. The silence in the Delwyn estate wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums, distinct from the usual quiet of a well-insulated $10 million home in Greenwich, Connecticut. Preston Delwyn threw his keys onto the marble console table. They landed with a sharp clack that echoed too loudly. He loosened his silk tie, the fabric feeling like a noose after a 12-hour day of hostile takeovers and managing the fallout of his latest tech merger. He checked his Rolex Daytona, 8:45 p.m. Usually, this was the time Clara would be hovering. She would be in the foyer, or perhaps just visible in the kitchen, waiting to ask if he'd eaten, offering a glass of wine he would inevitably criticize for being the wrong temperature. Clara was predictable. She was soft, pliable, and, frankly, boring. That was why he married her 3 years ago. She was a kindergarten teacher he'd met at a charity gala, pretty in a plain way, grateful for his attention, and completely awed by his world. She was the perfect accessory, decorative and silent. But tonight, the hallway was empty. "Clara!" he called out. His voice was impatient, expecting an immediate scurry of footsteps. Nothing. He frowned, walking toward the kitchen. The granite countertops were gleaming, devoid of the usual dinner preparations. No smell of roast chicken. No fresh flowers. He checked the living room. The expertly fluffed pillows sat undisturbed. "Clara, stop playing games. I have a headache," he snapped, heading for the stairs. He assumed she was sulking. It had been happening more often lately, ever since he'd stopped trying to hide his late-night texts with Sienna, the 24-year-old PR consultant he'd hired to rebrand the firm. Clara wasn't stupid, but Preston relied on her lack of spine. She would never leave. She had nowhere to go. Her parents were dead, she had no siblings, and he had made sure she quit her job the month they married. She was entirely dependent on his Amex Black card and his generosity. He pushed open the door to the master suite. "Clara, I'm not in the mood for—" He stopped. The room looked normal at first glance. The bed was made. The curtains were drawn. But there was a strange emptiness to the air. He walked to the walk-in closet, a cavernous space divided down the middle. His side was immaculate. Rows of Brioni suits, shelves of Italian leather shoes. He looked to the left. Clara's side wasn't empty. That would have been dramatic. Instead, it was curated. Her cheap coats were there. The dresses he hated were there. But the 4 evening gowns he had bought her for gala season? Gone. The diamond tennis bracelet he'd given her as an apology for missing their anniversary? Gone. And the safe. He rushed to the concealed wall safe behind the vanity mirror. He punched in the code. 10/24/88. His own birthday, of course. The door clicked open. His cash stacks were there. His Patek Philippe watches were there. The deeds to the properties were there. The only thing missing was her passport. He stared at the empty spot on the shelf. A cold prickle of irritation worked its way up his neck. She had actually done it. She had run away. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. "You've reached Clara. Leave a message." He hung up and laughed, a short, barking sound. "Cute," he muttered. Very cute, Clara. Let's see how far you get on the $500 cash you keep in your purse. He wasn't worried. He was annoyed. This was a tantrum, a cry for attention. She'd probably checked into the Holiday Inn down the interstate and would be back by morning, crying and apologizing. He went to the kitchen, poured himself a scotch, and dialed Sienna. "Hey, baby," Sienna's voice purred. "Is the Wicked Witch asleep?" "Better," Preston smirked, taking a sip of the 18-year-old single malt. "She's gone, ran away, probably cooling off at a motel." "Oh my God," Sienna giggled. "Did you change the locks yet?" "No need. She'll be back when she realizes she can't buy a latte without my permission. I'll let her sweat it out for 24 hours. Then when she crawls back, I'm presenting the post-nup revision. If she wants to stay, the allowance gets cut in half." He hung up, feeling powerful. He was the master of his universe. He controlled the assets, the narrative, and the future, or so he thought. The next morning, the house was still silent. Preston woke up with a stiff neck and a foul mood. He expected to find Clara in the kitchen, making pancakes as a peace offering. The kitchen was empty. Irritation shifted into anger. He checked his banking app. He wanted to see where she was. If she'd used the joint credit card, the one with the humiliatingly low limit he'd set, he'd know exactly where she was hiding. He scrolled through the transaction history. Starbucks, Greenwich, yesterday, 9:00 a.m. CVS Pharmacy, Greenwich, yesterday, 10:15 a.m. That was it. No hotel charges, no gas station fill-ups, no Uber rides. "Where the hell are you?" he whispered. He called the security company that monitored the estate. "Pull the gate logs for yesterday. What time did my wife leave?" "One moment, Mr. Delwyn." The operator typed for a few seconds. "Mrs. Delwyn's Audi is still in the garage, sir." "She didn't drive out." Preston froze. Then how did she leave? A town car arrived at 11:30 a.m., a black Mercedes Maybach, license plate registered to Centurion Services. She entered the vehicle with 2 suitcases. A Maybach? Clara didn't know anyone who drove a Maybach. Preston didn't even drive a Maybach. Where did it go? "We don't track vehicles off property, sir." Preston hung up, his mind racing. Maybe she was having an affair. The thought was laughable. Clara was too timid to order pizza, let alone a lover. But a Maybach implied money. He decided to call Arthur, his lawyer. "She's gone, Arthur. Left in a hired car. I want you to freeze the joint account. I want her cards declined when she tries to buy lunch today." "Done," Arthur said, his voice bored. "Do you want me to file a missing person report?" "No, that looks bad for the stock price. Just find her. Check flight manifests. If she left the state, I want to know." 2 hours later, Preston was in his corner office in Manhattan, staring out at the skyline, trying to focus on the acquisition of a microchip firm. But his phone buzzed. It was Arthur. "I found her," Arthur said. "Or at least I found where she went." "Which hotel?" "The Plaza. Did she think I wouldn't check the high-end places?" "She's not at a hotel, Preston. She's at Teterboro Airport." Preston rolled his eyes. "She's flying commercial. Where to? Her aunt's place in Ohio?" "No," Arthur hesitated. The silence on the line was strange. Arthur was a shark. He didn't hesitate. "She didn't fly commercial. She went through the private terminal. Meridian Teterboro." Preston paused. Meridian was where he flew from when he chartered jets for business. It was exclusive, expensive, and definitely not for Clara. "She chartered a plane?" Preston's voice rose. "With what money? I told you her cards are maxed out." "That's the thing, Preston. I called my contact at the tarmac. There's no record of a charter payment under Delwyn. No credit card authorization." "Then how did she get on a plane?" "She didn't charter it, Preston. The flight plan was filed under an owner-operator tail number. Preston sat down. She hitched a ride. With who? I have the tail number, N650CV. It departed Teterboro at 1:08 p.m. yesterday. Destination, Nice, France. It landed at Côte d'Azur Airport this morning. France? Preston shouted. Who the hell took my wife to France? I ran the tail number, Arthur said quietly. You might want to sit down. I am sitting down, Arthur. Who owns the jet? It's a Gulfstream GS650ER, brand new. List price around $70 million. It's not a charter, Preston. It's a private corporate jet. Who owns the corporation? The aircraft is registered to a holding company called Veritas Holdings, based in Zurich. But the primary listed operator, the individual authorized to dictate flight paths. Spit it out! It's Clara van der Hoeven. Preston blinked. Who? Clara van der Hoeven. That's the name on the manifest. And, Preston, I did some digging. Your wife's maiden name on your marriage license was Clara Smith, right? Yes, Clara Smith, from nowhere, Ohio. I think Smith was a placeholder. I just ran a facial recognition search against the Veritas Holdings Board of Directors. Your wife isn't Clara Smith. She's Clara van der Hoeven, the sole heiress to the van der Hoeven shipping dynasty. Her grandfather was the Dutch steel magnate. Her net worth. Preston, her personal trust is estimated at $4 billion. Preston dropped the phone. It hit the expensive mahogany desk with a dull thud. The room spun. $4 billion? The woman who asked him for permission to buy a $200 a pair of shoes? The woman he scolded for leaving the lights on because electricity costs money? The woman he was planning to divorce and leave with a pittance? She was worth 50 times what he was, and she had just flown a Gulfstream G650ER to the south of France without saying a word. Preston drove to the airport. He didn't know why. Maybe he needed to see the place where she had escaped. He stormed into the Meridian FBO, fixed base operator, ignoring the polite receptionist. My wife flew out of here yesterday, he demanded, slamming his hand on the counter. Tail number N650CV. I want to know who was with her. The manager, a tall man in a crisp suit, stepped forward. He looked at Preston with a cool, detached expression. Mr. Delwyn, I presume? You know who I am? We were instructed that you might stop by. Instructed? By who? By the owner of the aircraft. She left an envelope for you. But she gave strict instructions that it was only to be given to you if you came in person and caused a scene. You fulfilled the criteria. The manager slid a thick, cream-colored envelope across the marble counter. It was heavy. The paper was textured, the kind of stationery that cost more than a dinner for two. Preston ripped it open. Inside, there was no letter, no tear-stained goodbye. There was a single photocopy of a document. It was a prenup, his prenup. The one he had forced her to sign 3 years ago, the one that stated, in the event of divorce, neither party shall have claim to the assets acquired by the other prior to the marriage, nor any appreciation of said assets. He had written it to protect his millions. At the bottom of the page, Clara had circled a single clause in red ink. Clause 4B, total separation of debts and liabilities. And beneath that, she had written a short note in her elegant cursive. Thank you for protecting my money from your debts. You're going to need your own liquidity soon. CVDH Preston stared at the note. My money from your debts. What did she mean? His phone rang again. It was his CFO, Marcus. Preston, where are you? Marcus sounded frantic. I'm busy. What is it? It's the bank. The financing for the microchip merger. It just fell through. What? That's impossible. We had the backing of the Zurich Consortium. It was a done deal. The Zurich Consortium just pulled out. They sent a formal notice 5 minutes ago. They cited a conflict of interest with a primary stakeholder. Preston felt the blood drain from his face. Who is the primary stakeholder? I didn't know this, Preston, but the Zurich Consortium is a subsidiary. The parent company is Van der Hoeven International. Preston leaned against the counter, his legs shaking. He had built his entire business empire on loans and leverage, and he had just realized that the bank he was borrowing from was his wife. Marcus, Preston whispered. How much of our debt is held by them? Preston, all of it. The bridge loans, the mortgage on the office tower, the credit lines for payroll, they hold about 85% of our debt. And if they call it in, if they call in the loans immediately, we're insolvent by Friday. Preston looked at the manager of the private jet terminal. The man was smiling politely. Is there anything else I can help you with, Mr. Delwyn? Perhaps a water? I need a flight, Preston rasped. I need to get to Nice. Now. I'm afraid we don't have any charters available on such short notice, the manager said smoothly. However, there is a commercial flight out of JFK in 4 hours. Economy class might have a seat. Preston Delwyn, the man who hadn't flown commercial in a decade, turned and ran for the door. The flight to Nice was a nightmare. Preston sat in the middle seat of row 42, wedged between a crying toddler and a backpacker who smelled of patchouli oil. He had no Wi-Fi. He had 8 hours to think. He replayed the last 3 years, the way Clara would quietly read the Financial Times while he ranted about the market. He thought she was just looking at the pictures, the way she never asked for money, but always seemed to have nice clothes. He assumed she was a bargain hunter. The way she smiled when he bragged about his empire. It wasn't a smile of admiration, it was a smile of amusement. She was a lioness watching a house cat chase a laser pointer. He landed in Nice, disheveled and exhausted. He rented a car, a Fiat, because his credit card had been flagged for suspicious activity by his own bank, another complication he couldn't deal with yet, and drove toward the coordinates Arthur had managed to dig up. She wasn't at a hotel. She was at a villa in Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat. Cap-Ferrat was known as the Peninsula of Billionaires. It was where the King of Belgium had a home, where the co-founder of Microsoft had a villa. Preston pulled up to a gate that looked like the entrance to a fortress. Massive iron bars, flanked by stone lions. He pressed the intercom. "Delivery for Mrs. Delwyn?" he tried. "Mrs. Van der Hoeven is not accepting deliveries," a voice boomed. "It's her husband. It's Preston. Let me in." There was a long pause. The gate buzzed and slowly swung open. Preston drove up the winding driveway, lined with ancient olive trees and cypress. The house came into view. It wasn't a house. It was a palace, Belle Époque architecture, white stone glowing in the Mediterranean sun, overlooking the Azure Sea. And there, parked in the circular driveway, was a silver vintage Jaguar E-Type. Leaning against it was Clara. She looked different. Gone were the beige cardigans and the sensible flats. She was wearing a white linen jumpsuit that flowed like water, oversized sunglasses, and a silk scarf tied around her hair. She looked like a movie star from the 1960s. She looked expensive. Preston slammed the car door and marched toward her. "Clara." She didn't flinch. She took a sip from a crystal glass of iced tea. "Hello, Preston. You made good time. Economy must be faster than I remember." "Cut the crap, Clara. What is this? Who is paying for this?" He gestured wildly at the villa. "I am," she said calmly. "I bought this place 5 years ago. I usually come here in the summers. I missed it." You lied to me. For 3 years. "I never lied, Preston. You never asked." She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were cold, hard steel. When we met, you were so busy telling me how rich you were, how smart you were, how you were going to save me from my boring life. I just let you talk. I am your husband. I have a right to your assets. Check the prenup, darling. Clause 4A. Assets acquired prior to marriage remain sole property. I was born into this money. You don't touch a cent of it. I'll sue you. I'll drag this out in court for years. With what money? Clara smiled. I just got off the phone with the board in Zurich. We've decided to accelerate the debt collection on Delwyn Corp. You have 48 hours to pay back 120 million or we seize the company. Preston felt his knees give out. He actually stumbled. Clara, please. Why? Why are you doing this? I gave you a home. I took care of you. You cheated on me, Preston. The words hung in the warm air. It was nothing. It was just a fling. Sienna means nothing. I know she means nothing. She's a moron. But it's the disrespect, Preston. It's the way you spoke to me. The way you treated me like furniture. You thought I was weak because I was quiet. You mistook kindness for stupidity. She walked over to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something custom, smelling of jasmine and money. I stayed because I wanted to see if you could love me for me, not for the Van der Hoven name. I gave you 3 years to show me 1 ounce of genuine partnership. Instead, you gave me a strict allowance and treated me like a servant. I can change, Preston begged. He was crying now, the desperation real. Clara, baby, we can fix this. We're a power couple. Think of what we could do together with your capital and my vision. Clara laughed. It was a genuine, joyful laugh. Your vision? Preston, you're a mediocre middleman who got lucky in a bull market. You don't have vision, you have greed. She turned back to the Jaguar. A man stepped out from the villa's front door. He was tall, handsome, wearing a polo shirt. He walked over and handed Clara a set of keys. Ready for the boat, madame? He asked with a French accent. Yes, Laurent. Thank you. Who is he? Preston demanded, pointing a shaking finger. This is Laurent. He manages the estate, and he listens when I speak. Clara opened the car door. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a lunch reservation in Monaco. You have 47 hours to find $120 million. I'd suggest you start making calls. You can't leave me here. I can. And I am. Oh, and Preston? She looked back over her shoulder. The private jet, the G650. I named it the Silent Treatment. I thought it was fitting. The Jaguar roared to life. Clara sped down the driveway, leaving Preston standing alone in the dust of a billion-dollar estate, the silence of the afternoon settling around him, louder than any scream he could muster. The dust from the Jaguar's tires settled on Preston's suit, a Brioni custom fit that suddenly felt like a costume for a play that had been cancelled. He was stranded. His phone battery was at 14%. His wallet contained 3 platinum credit cards that were now likely useless pieces of plastic and about 40 euros in cash. He walked 3 miles back to the main road, sweating through his shirt, dragging his ego along the hot asphalt of Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat. He found a small cafe, ordered a double espresso, and tried to strategize. He needed liquidity. Fast. He dialed Sienna again. What do you want, Preston? Her voice wasn't purring anymore. It was shrill. Sienna, listen to me. I'm having a temporary cash flow issue. The bank accounts are frozen due to a misunderstanding with Clara. I need you to wire me 10,000, just to get me back to New York and hire a new legal team. Wire you? Sienna let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. Preston, my apartment keycard stopped working an hour ago. The concierge told me the lease was terminated by the holding company. Your holding company. I'll fix it, I swear. And the company car? The Porsche? Sienna interrupted. Repossessed while I was at the gym. They said the lease payments were 6 months behind. You told me you bought it cash. I moved funds around. It's complicated corporate tax strategy you wouldn't understand. I understand enough, she screamed. I understand that you're broke, and guess what? I just got a call from Vanderhoven International. Preston froze. The espresso cup shook in his hand. Why did they call you? They offered me a severance package, Preston. A consulting fee to sign a non-disclosure agreement and hand over all our text messages and emails. They offered me $50,000. You didn't take it. The money is already in my account. Good luck, Preston. Don't call me. The line went dead. Preston stared at the phone. Clara wasn't just divorcing him. She was dismantling him. She was buying his allies, seizing his assets, and isolating him with surgical precision. He tried his business partners next. He called Bryce, a hedge fund manager in Lower Manhattan, who owed Preston a favor for a tip on a pharmaceutical merger last year. Bryce, buddy, it's Preston. Preston? Bryce's tone was clipped, freezing. I really can't talk right now. I need a bridge loan, Bryce. Short term, high interest. I'm good for it. I just have a liquidity crunch because of a divorce settlement. Preston, look, word is out on the street. What word? The Zurich Consortium sent a memo to every major investment bank in New York and London this morning. It's a risk assessment notice. They've flagged Delwyn Corp for potential forensic accounting irregularities. Preston felt bile rise in his throat. That's slander. Is it? They attached an audit report, Preston. It looks bad. Shell companies, inflated valuations on the tech acquisitions. Nobody is going to touch you. If I lend you a dime, my compliance officer will have my head. You're radioactive. Bryce, please. Click. Preston sat back. The cafe owner was glaring at him, waiting for payment. Preston threw a €20 bill on the table, half his net worth, and walked out. He needed a way to fight back. He couldn't fight Clara with money. She had billions. He couldn't fight her with the law. She had the best lawyers in Europe. He had to fight dirty. He remembered a man he had used years ago for competitive intelligence, a polite term for corporate espionage, a Russian fixer named Victor who operated out of a basement in Lyon but had reach everywhere. Victor didn't care about credit ratings. He cared about leverage. Preston checked his watch, the Rolex Daytona. It was worth maybe $25,000 on the second-hand market. He found a pawn shop in Nice near the train station. The broker, a man with a magnifying loupe and tired eyes, offered him €8,000. It's worth 3 times that, Preston argued. Not without the box and papers, the man shrugged. Take it or leave it. Preston took the cash. It felt dirty in his hands. He rented a car, a cheap Peugeot, and drove north toward Lyon. He was going to find dirt on Clara Vanderhoven. Nobody was that clean. She was a billionaire heiress. There had to be skeletons, illegal tax havens, bribed officials, a secret child, something. If he could find one crack in her armor, he could blackmail her into dropping the debt. The road to Lyon was a study in decline. Preston drove the rented Peugeot, a compact that rattled ominously over 100 km/h, away from the sun-drenched coast and into the industrial grey of the Rhone Valley. The beauty of the Riviera faded, replaced by smokestacks, graffiti-tagged overpasses, and the grim reality of a man running out of road. He had €8,000 in cash in an envelope taped to his chest. It was the last of his liquidity, the final blood transfusion for a dying ambition. He wasn't going to New York to beg lawyers for help. They wouldn't take his calls anyway. He was going to the underworld. He was going to find the dirt that would make Clara bleed. Everyone had a secret. That was Preston's mantra. It was the philosophy that had fueled his rise. He had blackmailed his way onto his first board of directors. He had found incriminating photos of a rival CEO to secure the microchip merger. People were messy. People were flawed. Even billionaire heiresses with perfect hair and silent dispositions. Especially them. He arrived in Lyon just as the sky turned the color of a bruised plum. He parked the Peugeot in a district that didn't appear on tourist maps, La Guillotière. It was a place of shadows, neon signs buzzing with dying gas, and the smell of old tobacco and damp concrete. He found the establishment he was looking for. It wasn't an office. It was a pool hall called Le Chat Noir. But the sign had lost the C and H years ago, leaving it as at noir, at black. Fitting. The interior was a cavern of smoke and clicking ivory balls. Men with scars and bad tattoos leaned over tables, their eyes flicking toward Preston as he entered. He stood out like a sore thumb in his wrinkled, sweat-stained Brioni suit. He looked like exactly what he was, a rich man who had fallen off the mountain. Victor was in the back, in a glass-walled office that smelled of stale espresso and ozone. He was a small man, deceptively frail-looking, with skin the color of parchment and fingers that moved across a keyboard with the speed of a pianist playing Rachmaninoff. He didn't look up when Preston entered. "You are late, Mr. Delwyn," Victor said, his voice a dry rasp, heavily accented. "And you look terrible. The Mediterranean sun doesn't agree with you?" "Cut the small talk, Victor." Preston pulled the chair out and sat down heavily. "I need you to work your magic. I need a level 5 extraction." Victor stopped typing. He swiveled his chair around, his eyes, pale blue and unblinking, fixing on Preston. "Level 5? That is invasive. That is expensive. And illegal in 12 countries. I have cash." Preston reached into his shirt and ripped the envelope free. He slammed it onto the desk. 8,000 euros, and I'll give you 10% of my settlement when I get my company back. That could be 10 million, Victor. Victor looked at the envelope, then back at Preston. He didn't smile. "I do not work on promises of future millions from men who drive rented Peugeots. But 8,000... it buys you an hour of my time. Who is the target?" "Clara van der Hoven," Preston said. Formerly Clara Delwyn. Victor's eyebrows shot up. He let out a low whistle. "The shipping heiress? You want to dig into the van der Hoven data stream? Mr. Delwyn, that is not a target. That is a fortress. They have cybersecurity that rivals the Mossad." "She's my wife," Preston hissed. "She's been living in my house for 3 years. She's not a fortress. She's a kindergarten teacher who got lucky with her DNA. She's sloppy. She uses the same password for everything. I know her." "You knew the woman who made your toast," Victor corrected. "You do not know the woman who runs a multinational conglomerate. But..." He picked up the envelope and thumbed through the bills. "Money is money. Let us see what we can find." Victor turned back to his array of monitors. He began to type, the sound rhythmic and frantic. Lines of code cascaded down the screens, green, red, white. Preston watched, his heart hammering against his ribs. He needed something. Anything. An affair? A secret drug addiction? A hidden child from a past marriage? A tax evasion scheme? "I am bouncing the signal through 3 servers in Estonia and 1 in Macau," Victor narrated, his voice devoid of emotion. "Attempting to breach her personal cloud via the surname Delwyn. Denied. Trying van der Hoven. Firewalled." "Try Barnaby," Preston said. "It was her dog's name. She told me once she used it for her old email." Victor typed it in. "Access granted." Preston let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "I told you. She's sentimental. She's weak." "Accessing a private server located in the Cayman Islands," Victor muttered. "Interesting. It is not a standard cloud account. It is a secure data vault. Downloading file structure." A folder icon appeared on the main screen. It was labeled simply, "The Hive." "Open it," Preston commanded, leaning in so close his nose almost touched the screen. Victor clicked. The folder opened to reveal a series of subdirectories. But as the names of the files populated the screen, the triumph in Preston's chest began to curdle into cold dread. There were no love letters, no scandalous photos, no receipts for illegal gambling. The folders were labeled with terrifying precision. Folder 01, Delwyn Corp, Forensic Audit, 2021-2023. Folder 02, The Sienna Protocol, Surveillance and Assets. Folder 03, PS Voice Logs, Encrypted. Folder 04, Project Icarus, Final Draft. "What is this?" Preston whispered. "This is not a diary, Mr. Delwyn," Victor said, his voice dropping. "This is a dossier. She has been building a case file." "Open the Sienna Protocol," Preston ordered, his voice shaking. Victor opened the folder. Hundreds of files spilled out. Preston stared. There were transcripts of his text messages with Sienna. There were GPS logs of his car parked outside Sienna's apartment. There were bank transfer receipts, the ones he thought he had hidden by routing them through a shell company in Delaware. Clara had traced the shell company back to him. She had the IP addresses. She had the dates. "She knew," Preston murmured. "She knew everything. For years." "She didn't just know," Victor said, pointing to a file. "She was managing the risk. Look at this memo." Victor opened a text file. It was a note Clara had written to herself. Date, Feb 14, 2022. Subject, Valentine's Day dinner. Note, P gave me a diamond bracelet, charged to the company Amex against compliance rules. He is currently texting S from the bathroom. Do not intervene yet. Let the debt accumulate. The leverage increases with every infraction. She let me do it, Preston said, horror dawning on him. She let me dig the hole deeper. She was feeding you the shovel, Victor noted dryly. Now, let us look at this. Project Icarus. Don't, Preston said instinctively. He felt a primal urge to run, to smash the computer, to unsee what was coming. We paid for the hour, Victor said ruthlessly. He double-clicked the folder. Inside was a single massive PDF document. It was formatted as a legal complaint. United States District Court, Southern District of New York, United States of America, versus Preston, James Delwyn indictment charges. 1. Wire fraud, 18 U.S.C., paragraph 1343. 2. Securities fraud, 15 U.S.C., paragraph 78J. 3. Money laundering, 18 U.S.C., paragraph 1956. 4. Embezzlement of corporate funds. Victor scrolled down. The document was hundreds of pages long. It detailed every shortcut Preston had ever taken. The bribes he paid to the zoning commissioner in Brooklyn, the falsified revenue reports he showed to investors, the offshore accounts where he hid the skimmed profits. How? Preston choked out. How does she have the audio? The board meetings were closed door. The office was swept for bugs. Victor minimized the document and opened a system log file. He ran a quick diagnostic. Mr. Delwyn, Victor said, turning to him slowly. Did you ever wonder why your wife insisted on giving you that new iPhone for your birthday 3 years ago? The one she set up for you because she wanted to be helpful? Preston nodded dumbly. She cloned the admin privileges, Victor said. Your phone has been mirroring every keystroke, every voice memo, and every ambient sound to her server for 36 months. You have been carrying a microphone in your pocket every day of your marriage. Preston felt the room spin. He grabbed the edge of the desk to steady himself. She's not just leaving me, he whispered. She's ending me. Wait, Victor said. There is an addendum to the indictment. Look at the timestamp. Preston looked. The file was last modified 48 hours ago. It hasn't been filed yet, Victor said. It is in the drafts folder. It is ready to send, but the transmission log shows pending. Pending? Hope, sharp and painful, spiked in Preston's chest. She hasn't sent it to the FBI? Not yet, but look at the trigger command. Victor pointed to a line of code at the bottom of the screen. Auto-send trigger. If GPS P. Delwyn enters, coordinates Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat, Villa Veritas, and voice recognition, threat detected. Execute SEND. What does that mean? Preston asked. It is a dead man's switch, Victor explained, looking at Preston with a mixture of pity and awe. She knows you will come for her. She knows you will be angry. She has set the system to automatically email this entire indictment to the Department of Justice the moment you step foot on her property and raise your voice. Preston stared at the screen. It was a trap. A perfect, technological bear trap. If you go there and try to intimidate her, Victor finished, you trigger your own arrest. She doesn't even have to press a button. You do it yourself. Preston stood up. The chair fell over behind him with a loud crash. I have to stop her. I have to beg her. If I go in there on my knees, if I go in there crying, maybe the trigger won't go off. Mr. Delwyn, Victor warned, his hand hovering over the keyboard. This woman is playing 4D chess while you are playing checkers. Do not go back there. Run. Take your Peugeot. Drive to Italy. Get on a boat to Albania. Disappear. It is your only chance. I can't run, Preston said, his voice hollow. She has my passport. She has my money. I have nothing. If I run, I starve. If I go back, maybe I can convince her. She loved me once. I know she did. She loved the man she thought you were, Victor said. She hates the man you are. Victor closed the laptop. The screen went black, leaving them in the dim reflection of the pool hall lights. He picked up the envelope of cash and held it out to Preston. Take it, Victor said. What? You did the work. I am refunding you, Victor said, shoving the envelope into Preston's jacket pocket. I do not take money from ghosts. I'm not a ghost, Preston shouted, the fear turning into irrational anger. You are walking into a grave you dug yourself, Victor said quietly. Keep the money. You will need it for the canteen in federal prison. Victor stood up and walked out of the glass office, disappearing into the smoky haze of the pool hall, leaving Preston alone with the silence. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was screaming. Preston touched his pocket, the phone, the iPhone she had given him. He pulled it out. It looked innocent. Sleek, black, expensive. He stared at the black screen, seeing his own terrified reflection. She's listening, he thought. Even now, he wanted to smash it. He raised his hand to throw it against the wall, but he stopped. If he destroyed the phone, she would know he knew. She might send the file manually, or maybe destroying the connection was another trigger. He couldn't risk it. He had to play the role. He had to be the desperate, confused husband one last time. He lowered the phone and slid it back into his pocket. I'm coming, Clara, he whispered to the empty room, knowing she might catch the audio later. I'm coming to fix this. He walked out of the pool hall, past the thugs and the gamblers, and out into the Leon night. The air was cold. He got back into the Peugeot. The engine sputtered before catching. He turned the car south, back toward the coast, back toward the villa, back toward the woman who hadn't said a word when she left him, but whose silence was now deafening. He drove toward his judgment day, fueled by the arrogance that he could still talk his way out of a trap that had been set 3 years ago. He didn't realize that some words, once written, cannot be erased, and some silences, once broken, destroy everything in their wake. The drive back to Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat was a blur of adrenaline and terror. Preston drove the rented Peugeot like a maniac, tires screeching around the hairpin turns of the Corniche roads that hugged the cliffs of the French Riviera. Below him, the Mediterranean was a black void, swallowing the moonlight. He had rehearsed his speech. He would fall to his knees. He would cry. He could always cry on command. He would tell Clara that he had been lost, that the pressure of the business had broken him, that Sienna was a momentary lapse of sanity. He would promise to sign a post-nup, giving her everything, as long as she didn't file that PDF with the DOJ. He would be her servant. He arrived at the gate. It was open. A bad sign. He sped up the driveway. The silver Jaguar E-Type was gone. But the lights of the villa were blazing. Every window was illuminated, casting long, golden rectangles onto the manicured lawns. He slammed the car into park and ran to the front door. It was unlocked. "Clara!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Clara, please, we need to talk." He ran through the foyer, past the grand staircase, into the living room. Empty. He checked the kitchen. Empty. Then he felt a breeze. The glass doors to the back terrace were wide open. He stepped out. The view was breathtaking. The lights of yachts bobbing in the harbour below, the scent of pine and sea salt. And there she was. Clara was standing at the edge of the infinity pool, her back to him. She had changed. She was wearing a sharp, navy blue business suit, funny attire for a relaxed evening at a villa. She was holding a glass of champagne. "Clara," Preston panted, walking slowly toward her, hands raised in surrender. "Thank God, I know everything. I know who you are. I know about the money." Clara didn't turn around. She took a slow sip. "I figured you would find out eventually. You're not smart, Preston, but you are desperate, and desperate men are resourceful." "Baby, please." Preston stepped closer. "I messed up. I know I messed up. But you can't send me to jail. Think about us. Think about the last 3 years. Was it all a lie? Did you feel nothing?" She turned around. Her face was unreadable. No anger, no sadness, just a terrifying neutrality. "The last 3 years were an experiment, Preston," she said softly. "My father always told me that men like you, men who are loud, who brag, who treat waiters poorly, are hollow. I wanted to prove him wrong. I wanted to believe that if I gave you unconditional support, a quiet home, and loyalty, you would become a good man." She swirled the champagne. "But you didn't. You took my silence for weakness. You took my kindness for stupidity. And when you thought I wasn't looking, you stole from the very people you were supposed to protect." "I did it for us," Preston lied, the desperation making his voice shrill. "I wanted to build an empire for us." "No." Clara shook her head. "You did it for yourself. And you didn't build an empire. You built a house of cards." "Clara, stop the file, please. I know about Project Icarus. I know you have the evidence. Just delete it. We can work this out. I'll sign over the company. I'll disappear. Just don't send it." Clara looked at her watch. "A Cartier tank this time, understated and classic. I can't delete it, Preston." "Why not? You own the servers. You're the heiress." "Because I didn't just write the complaint," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "I am the witness." "What?" "Project Icarus wasn't my idea, Preston. It was the FBI's." Preston froze. The night air suddenly felt freezing. "What are you talking about?" 6 months ago, The Securities and Exchange Commission flagged your trades. They came to me. They knew I was your wife. They knew about my family trust. They asked if I was involved in your fraud. She stepped closer to him, her heels clicking on the stone. I had a choice. I could go down with you as an accomplice, or I could help them build the case. I chose the truth. I've been wearing a wire since Christmas, Preston. Every time you bragged about hiding assets over dinner. Recorded. Every time you called your broker to wash funds. Recorded. Preston stumbled back. You rat, you snitch. I'm not a snitch, Preston. I'm a victim who fought back. She pointed toward the driveway. And I'm not the one who's going to ruin you. You did that all by yourself. I'm leaving, Preston snarled. He turned to run. He would take the Peugeot. He would drive to Italy. He would disappear. But as he turned, the darkness of the driveway exploded in blue and red light. Sirens wailed, cutting through the peaceful Riviera night. Preston shielded his eyes. 4 black SUVs had blocked the driveway. Men in tactical gear were spilling out. But they weren't French police. A man in a suit stepped forward, flashing a badge. "Preston Delwyn," the voice boomed. "This is Agent Miller with the FBI, working in conjunction with Interpol. You are under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering." Preston looked back at Clara. She was walking away. She wasn't watching the arrest. She was walking toward the far side of the lawn, where the darkness was deepest. "Clara, help me!" he screamed as the agents grabbed his arms, forcing him onto the hood of the Peugeot. The cold steel of handcuffs snapped around his wrists. "Clara!" She didn't stop. She reached the edge of the lawn. Suddenly, floodlights turned on, illuminating a helipad that Preston hadn't even noticed. Sitting there, rotors already spinning, was a helicopter. Sleek, black, with the Van der Hoeven crest on the side. Clara climbed in. She put on a headset. As the helicopter lifted off, the wind whipped the trees. Preston, pressed against the hood of the car, looked up. Through the glass of the cockpit, he saw her one last time. She looked down at him. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She simply turned her head and looked forward, toward the horizon. She left exactly as she had lived with him, without saying a word. The helicopter banked over the Mediterranean and sped away, disappearing into the night sky, leaving Preston Delwyn with nothing but the loud, screaming consequences of his own noise. Epilogue. The quiet after the storm 3 months later. The Federal Correctional Facility in Otisville is known for being one of the better places to serve time. But it is still a cage. Preston sat in the common room, watching the small television mounted in the corner. He had aged 10 years in 90 days. His hair was graying. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a twitchy paranoia. The news channel was on. And in business news, the Van der Hoeven shipping empire has announced a new philanthropic initiative, the anchor said. The Silent Voices Foundation, dedicated to financial literacy for women in abusive relationships, launched today with a starting endowment of $100 million. The screen cut to footage of a gala in Zurich. There she was. Clara looked radiant. She was wearing a gown that probably cost more than Preston's former house. She was standing at a podium. Preston leaned forward, mesmerized. He had never seen her give a speech. She hated public speaking. On the screen, Clara leaned into the microphone. The room went silent. "For a long time," Clara said, her voice steady and clear, "I thought my voice didn't matter. I thought that to keep the peace, I had to keep quiet. But I learned a very expensive lesson." She paused, and for a second, Preston felt like she was looking right through the camera lens, straight into his soul. Silence isn't about being weak, she said. Silence is about waiting for the right moment to speak. And when you finally do, make sure the whole world hears you. The crowd erupted in applause. Preston stared at the screen until the guard turned it off. "Lights out, Delwyn," the guard grunted. Preston walked back to his cell. It was quiet, just the hum of the ventilation and the distant clank of heavy doors. He lay on his cot and stared at the ceiling. He realized then that he would spend the next 15 years in this silence. But for the first time in his life, he was listening. Preston Delwyn thought he held the power because he held the volume. He believed that the person who controlled the conversation controlled the world. But he forgot the oldest rule of the predator. The most dangerous things in the jungle don't roar before they strike. They wait. Clara didn't leave him with a fight. She left him with a lesson. She showed him that true power isn't about how loud you can scream, but about how effectively you can walk away. In the end, his private jet didn't just fly her to freedom, it flew him to his fate. Did this story keep you on the edge of your seat? If you enjoyed this tale of revenge, wealth, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Preston deserved 15 years, or was Clara too cold? I'll see you in the next video.